No sooner has a temporary peace been declared in the Middle East than America has not one, but two leaked text scandals to chew over. Amazing. Now, almost no matter what is in the leaked text, a leaked text scandal is a fun scandal because it's inherently salacious. People text under the false presumption that what they're writing is private, and so they relax, they're unguarded. And very often, however, they're wrong, and those texts come out. It's happened to me. And what you learn when you read them is what people are saying and presumably thinking in private. So it's kind of a window into a person's private life. It's very much like a sex tape, and it's irresistible. Everybody loves a leaked text scandal. What's interesting, really, is are they meaningful? Does it actually tell you something about the person who's texting? Well, that all depends on the context. There are plenty of things you text throughout the course of a day, if you're an average American, that really don't reflect a lot about who you really are or what you really think, much less what you intend to do. If you text, "That girl's so hot," do you plan to sleep with her? Maybe, maybe not. In fact, likely not. But the presumption to many readers is that you do, so it's misleading inherently. If you say something really ugly, does that mean you're an ugly person? Well, that all depends. How vehemently did you say it? Did you repeat it? Did you explain why you thought it? Again, context really matters, and leaked text can be grossly unfair and misleading to the person from whom they're leaked because they don't actually reveal the character of the texter. And moreover, by the way, who wants to be reduced to his ugliest text? Not many of us. But they're still interesting, and they can reveal a lot about the people who sent them. So let's go in order through the details of the two leaked text scandals now roiling this country, because not simply the text, but the response to the texts tells you a lot about the state of American politics, and particularly about the differences between the two major parties in how they responded. So first up, the Republican scandal. And it comes to us from Telegram, which is a supposedly pretty secure texting app. And we're going to read some of them. So these kids were texting to each other. These are young Republicans texting each other on a group chat on Telegram. This somehow wound up on Politico. And they are saying things like this. They're referring to African Americans as, quote, the watermelon people. Here's someone else saying that, and we're quoting, everyone that votes no is going to the gas chamber. And finally, someone on the group text called someone, and I'm quoting now, retarded. So these are young Republicans from across the country texting each other. They are young men. And you might think at first glance that these are kind of young men texts. These are mildly, or in some cases more than mildly, edgy. And they're kind of showing off to each other. So how bad is this? Well, you probably wouldn't say it at Thanksgiving dinner, but is it a death penalty offense? Well, let's check in with some of the guardians of public morals on the Republican side. First up, this is a statement from the Young Republicans, National Young Republican Board of Directors. And we have no idea who these people are, but you can imagine affluent, unmarried gentlemen shepherding these young Republicans through their political growth. I'm not saying they need FBI background checks, but you can just sort of imagine in your mind who these guys are. And we're assuming they're guys. Of course they are. We're quoting, this is their response to these naughty texts leaked to Politico. Quote, we are appalled by the vile and inexcusable language revealed in the Politico article published today. Vile and inexcusable. Such behavior is disgraceful. Not just vile and inexcusable, but disgraceful. It's unbecoming of any Republican, and it stands in direct opposition to the values our movement represents. Bracket, values that are not in any way articulated by the board of the Young Republicans, but whatever, they stand against those values. Those involved must immediately resign from all positions within their state and local Young Republican organizations. We must hold ourselves to the highest standards of integrity, respect, and professionalism. Well, it's an unequivocal statement of disgust. Next up, this is Congressman Mike Lawler. Seems like a nice enough guy from New York. He's a young man whose donors were very offended by this. And so he wrote this, Mike Lawler, acting on behalf of people who pay him money, no question. Quote, the deeply offensive and hateful comments reportedly made in a private chat among members of the New York State Young Republicans are disgusting. Not only deeply offensive and hateful, but disgusting. They should resign from any leadership position immediately and reflect on how far they have strayed from basic human respect and decency. You, sir, the one who called somebody retarded, are indecent. You have strayed from public decency. That is Mike Lawler's position. So these kids, and who knows how old they are, none of them over 30, no question about it, texting each other in the middle of the day, blowing off work on Telegram. These kids should resign their positions, hang their heads in shame, and reflect on the indecency of their text exchange with their buddies. So that's the position of official Republicandom to these boys. If you didn't know better, you might think that the whole purpose of being an official Republican is to keep your party within certain bounds, not of decency, no, but certain bounds whose rules are written maybe by the other party. This looks a lot like gatekeeping, not the preservation of decency. Why do we think that? Well, because there is widespread indecent behavior among Republican officials. Not just indecent sexual behavior, though doubtless that exists too, but out in the open, public indecency. For example, people taking money from the payday loan lobby. Yes, that happens. Or from foreign governments. That happens too. Or openly advocating for pointless wars in which Americans get killed for no reason, in which our treasury is drained on behalf of somebody else, not us. There are plenty of Republicans who support all of that. Lindsey Graham, for example. How many American deaths would you estimate Lindsey Graham is responsible for? Not simply as a man who frequently articulates the need to go die for some other country, but as a man who votes to start wars that get Americans killed. Has Mike Lawler denounced him as indecent? Should he be reflecting upon his sins? Nope. Lindsey Graham is a Republican elder in good standing, beloved by everybody because he's funny. What about the Republicans who constantly telling us that we need to pledge allegiance to a foreign country? Are those people traitors? Have they committed an indecent act? No, they're all totally fine. But according to Mike Lawler and the board of the National Young Republicans organization, these kids are done. So the response, and that's the interesting part of this story, really, not the fact that someone got called retarded or said someone should go to the gas chambers, but the response was quick and it was unequivocal. The party will not tolerate this, the Republican Party. And what's interesting about this story is that it appeared against the backdrop of a bigger and longer story, one that began at the beginning of this month out of Virginia, where there's a very tight race for attorney general. It's one of those positions that very few people outside of politics consider important, but within politics is considered the key position in any state. It's the head lawyer in the state. That person has an awful lot of power. And the race in Virginia includes the Republican incumbent standing up against a 36-year-old man called Jay Jones. Jay Jones is a former delegate in the Virginia House. And a few years ago, Jay Jones became very annoyed, apparently, with the head Republican in the House of Delegates. And he expressed his anger at this man in a text exchange with a Republican delegate, interesting, with a woman. And that text exchange unfolded this way. Now, I'm going to read this verbatim, and you can decide whether this is lacking context or not. So this is Jay Jones, the 36-year-old then delegate, black guy, now running for attorney general. And he's talking about a man called Todd Gilbert, the head Republican in the Virginia House. And he says of Gilbert, and he's speaking to Kerry Conyer, who's a fellow delegate, a Republican, he says, if these guys go before me, if they die before me, I will go to their funerals to piss on their graves, send them out awash in something. To which Kerry Conyer, clearly is kind of a decent person, says, Jay Jones. And then Jones responds this way, 3 people, 2 bullets. Gilbert, Hitler, and Pol Pot. Gilbert gets 2 bullets to the head. Spoiler, put Gilbert in the crew with the 2 worst people you know, and he receives both bullets every time. Jay, says Kerry Conyer, please stop. Jay says, LOL, okay. Then she says, it really bothers me when you talk about hurting people or wishing death on them. It isn't okay, no matter who they are. So at this point, she calls him. Kerry Conyers calls Jay Jones and says, I'm really bothered by our text exchange. Do you mean that? Do you really wish death on the head Republican in the House? And Jay Jones says, not only do I wish death on him and his wife, I also wish death on their children. He says that. And we know he says it because he repeats it in this text exchange which followed their phone conversation. She says this to Jay Jones. You weren't simply asking questions and you know it, Jones. I genuinely was. I wasn't attacking you. I was trying to understand your logic. She says, you weren't trying to understand. You were hoping Jennifer Gilbert's children would die. To which you would expect Jay Jones to say, I don't want our kids to die. I was just trying to make a rhetorical point, right? No. Jay Jones says, yes, I do want them to die. I've told you this before. Only when people feel pain personally do they move on policy. To which Conyers says, I point blank asked you more than 3 times and you dug in that you meant it. I'm honestly questioning a lot today. And he writes back in the clearest sentence ever uttered in a private text exchange. I mean, I do think Todd and Jennifer are evil and they're breeding little fascists. Yes, I think that. They're evil and they're breeding little fascists who deserve to die. This is not one of those text exchanges where you have to guess at the context or the intent. This is an exchange between 2 people, one of whom is calling for the murder of children, and the other is trying really hard from the context here to talk him out of thinking that. You don't really mean that, do you, Jay Jones? Yes, I do. Yes, I do mean that. Now, there are so many levels of irony here. The most obvious is this is a leading Democrat who wants to be the chief law enforcement officer in the state, who is a gun control advocate calling for the murder of kids, okay? And calling for the murder of kids because they're related to adults he doesn't like. This is African ethics. This is the Hutu mentality. This is guilt by blood. There is nothing less Western than this. This is the idea that you are tainted or you're virtuous because of how you were born. This is a collective understanding of the world. This is tribal. And if you think it through, this is what identity politics inexorably leads to. It leads toward giving some people rewards and others very dire punishments based on how they look and based on who their parents are. There is nothing less Western than this, but Jay Jones embraces it completely. And the man that he's talking about, by the way, Todd Gilbert, then the head Republican, is not famous as some kind of firebrand. He's just sort of a normal guy. So what is going on here exactly? What's going on here is what we see all around us. You have 2 parties, one of which is committed to polite language, and the other is committed to following the logic of their own belief, identity politics being the core belief of the Democratic Party, to its logical extension. And the logical extension is some groups get the rewards and other groups get killed. This is the logic of a lot of the world, by the way. It's the logic of Africa, all of Africa. It's the logic of the Middle East. It is not the logic of America, of our politics, of our civil society, of our religion. It's the opposite. So why did it take leaked text exchanges for us to find this out? We're going to speak to the head Republican in the House of Delegates in Virginia in a minute and ask. But there are a couple of things to point out. This man, Jay Jones, is almost a perfect representative of his party. He is black, and because he has very often been the victim of racism because that's what it is to be black in America. You don't get a fair shot. No one takes you seriously. You're constantly being attacked. And he's talked about this quite a bit. Here is Jay Jones talking about his experience as a black man in America.
All across this Commonwealth, whether it's a Confederate flag hanging on the highways here in the Commonwealth, whether it is our restrictive voting laws that we've worked to update in the legislature. We've got so much work to do. We know that our system is inequitable and unjust. If you've ever been to a correctional facility or a jail in this Commonwealth, you'll see that the faces are predominantly black and brown. That doesn't make any sense. We've got to make sure we update this system, start from scratch to make sure that it's going to work for every single person. As a black Virginian who has experienced racism and discrimination firsthand, I know what this is all about.
So that's the thing about Jay Jones. He's seen racial discrimination firsthand. In the state where he lives, literally in his state, there was a person who had a Confederate flag. So he's lived it. I mean, it's not crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge to face off fire hoses, but it's pretty close. Someone flew a Confederate flag in his state. Here he is again. This is another quote from him, which I'll read. This is Jay Jones during the Ralph Northam, former Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, blackface scandal, when it turned out that Ralph Northam had worn blackface at a party in college decades before. Literally true. Ralph Northam was also openly for infanticide, not a problem. But he wore blackface at a party once, and no one was more rattled, almost undone by this than Jay Jones. Listen to Jay Jones at the time. To me, and many people like me, these events are a window into a struggle that defines daily life for African Americans from the day we are born until the day we die. And despite the generations of suffering and sacrifice, my own life has been impacted by the overt and covert racism that has haunted my ancestors for hundreds of years. And it wasn't always overt racism thrown in my face. It was the casual racism, the subtle comments, the jokes from white acquaintances who had the luxury of thinking about race as fodder for humor. The black Virginia that is still oppressed by vestiges of Jim Crow in our legal system, that fears law enforcement, is mocked in yearbooks and photos year after year after year, and looks skeptically at white Virginia because of the generations past. So you can see Jay Jones has felt the pain. He's felt the sting, the bullwhip on his shoulders, the German shepherds at his heels, fighting for equality in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And you know that from the world he grew up in. Jay Jones is the grandson of a prominent lawyer in Norfolk. Jay Jones's father went to boarding school in Princeton. He became a judge, just like Jay Jones's mother. Jay Jones went to the most expensive private school in Norfolk. Then he went from there to William and Mary, and then he was forced to endure the University of Virginia Law School. Now, we haven't seen the deal he cut with financial aid, but we can guess he probably paid nothing for any of that. And that's the racism he has felt. Now, the man he's attacking, by the way, the man whose children he would like to murder, went to public school. The white guy, he went to public school. He's not the grandson of a rich lawyer. His dad did not go to Princeton. He's not the son of two judges, but he is a white guy. Therefore, he's the oppressor. This is a very familiar script. You thought it ended when cancel culture went away, but of course, cancel culture didn't go anywhere. It's in full force, and it always will be until it's smashed. Why? Well, because it's the source of power. It's the source of moral authority. Victimhood is power. And so the one thing that you can't give up is your victimhood. And that's how we wound up at this very weird place that we are now, where the richest and most entitled people in our society, the people who've derived the greatest benefits from our society, persist in telling you day after day that they are the oppressed. They need security. People are being mean to them. Oh, I've got to have security. You better pay for it, by the way, because your rhetoric has endangered me. You don't know the pain that I suffer with. Billionaires say this all the time. People like Jay Jones, coddled, growing up not in the hood, but in a household of two judges, one of whom went to Princeton, going probably for free to the local white private school. This guy is telling you that he's Medgar Evers. And the thing is, this is 70 years after Brown versus Board of Education. 70 years since the Supreme Court banned segregation. And here's this guy, the product of the best Norfolk has to offer, again, probably for free, someone ought to ask him, is telling us that he's a victim. So if 70 years later, politicians are still saying that, then you're starting to figure out that this will never end because it's the key to their power over you. The second interesting thing about what Jay Jones says, which I think any normal person would say is instantly disqualifying, it's not an offhand remark about how someone's retarded or should go to the gas chamber. By the way, not just the gas chamber at Auschwitz, but just the gas chamber. Could be the California penal gas chamber, not specified, but whatever. The kid said it, ugly thing to say, shouldn't have said it. But that kid is being written out of Republican politics, and this guy, who has two separate long text exchanges and a phone call where a Republican friend is trying to talk him out of genocidal intent, says again and again and again, no, I want to kill the children. because they're little fascists because of the blood in their veins or the color of their skin or whatever. They're in the wrong tribe. They should be killed. That's pretty heavy. And for a chief law enforcement officer of a major American state, that is disqualifying. If that's not disqualifying, then nothing is disqualifying. Has Jay Jones been disqualified? No, he could win. He could win the election. Early voting is in progress right now. Of course, that's the point of early voting. It's to make sure people vote before they know anything. He could win. And one of the reasons he could win is because the Democratic Party of Virginia and nationally has formed a phalanx around him to protect him. The Black Caucus of Virginia, elected black legislators in Virginia, because he's in their tribe, are defending him flat out. But Trump is bad, they say. Trump is bad. Really? Has Trump called for the children of Americans he disagreed with to be murdered because they're related to people he disagrees with? Probably not. And if he ever does do that, every normal person will call for him to step down because that is disqualifying. But according to the Black Caucus of Virginia, no, Jay Jones, good enough. And it's not just on a statewide level. It's at the national level. Here's Nancy Pelosi defending Jay Jones. Watch.
There is a Democrat running for attorney general who's embroiled in a scandal over text messages in which he, the Democrat, said that the GOP Speaker of the House of Delegates should get 2 bullets to the head for how he paid tribute to a former moderate Democratic lawmaker who died. He has apologized. Should he get out of the race?
Well, that's up to the people, the leaders in Virginia. They have said he has apologized. What I understand is they say that on balance, he's a better person to be attorney general.
He's a better. In what sense, Ms. Former Speaker, is this man a better choice to be attorney general of the state of Virginia? Of course, no one will ever ask her that. You'll notice that CNN truncated the quotes where he's kind of offering up some rhetorical. If you had 2 bullets, who would you kill? And left out the part where he says we should kill the children too. And he goes full Hutu, full African, and says we should kill the children, because they're little fascists, because their parents are fascists. Kill the wife, kill the boar, kill the farmer. That's what that is. That's kill the boar, kill the farmer. CNN left that out, of course. But Nancy Pelosi just says, well, he's better. Well, in what sense is he better? How could anything be worse than that? And the answer is, of course, abortion, another form of killing. That's all they care about. They want the ritual to continue. And somewhere in her reptile brain, she understands that a Democratic AG will be more likely to protect abortion than a Republican. And that's it. That's the only issue that matters. That's the only domestic issue that matters. It's neocon foreign policy and abortion. That's all that matters to the Republican Party, because that's all that matters to its donors. And both are incredibly dark. Both are about killing. That's what connects them. Neocon foreign policy, kill them. Abortion, kill them. And both make the people who espouse them feel like God. That's the appeal. They're not policies, they're rituals. They're Canaanite rituals. Of course, they're sacrifices. But that's the most important thing. And it's so important to her and to her party that she's willing to be a little bit embarrassed. I'm sure part of her, she grew up Catholic in Baltimore 80 years ago. Part of her was thinking, ugh, kill the children? Can we really support that? And then those instincts are overridden by what she knows to be true, which is anything that jeopardizes abortion must be stopped, no matter what. And that's also clearly the calculation of Abigail Spanberger. Now, she's a member of Congress from Northern Virginia. She's also probably the single creepiest person to serve in the House. A former CIA officer, actual CIA officer, or for some Saudi think tank, and then the CIA as an officer, which you think would disqualify someone immediately from serving in the Congress. How can you be an intel officer and then serve in the Congress? That's not a good idea, because it further blurs the lines between intel gathering and governing, which are blurred enough. But Abigail Spanberger, who's kind of the perfect distillation of the low IQ lefty suburban mom, is running for governor right now and winning still against the Republican candidate, Winsome Sears. And in their only debate the other night, Winsome Sears saw an advantage in talking about Jay Jones and put this question directly to Abigail Spanberger. This is someone who's running on your ticket. His name will be right next to hers on Election Day. What do you think of this? Amazing exchange. Watch this.
He must leave the race because J. Jones advocated the murder, Abigail, the murder of a man, a former speaker, as well as his children who were 2 and 5 years old. You have little girls. What would it take him pulling the trigger? Is that what would do it? And then you would say he needs to get out of the race, Abigail? You have nothing to say? Abigail, what if he said it about your 3 children? Is that when you would say he should get out of the race, Abigail? You're running to be governor.
Imagine that, the self-discipline that takes to just sit there as your opponent says things that are indisputably true, and no normal person you would hope in the United States would disagree. You can't call for the murder of somebody's small children just because you don't like his politics. And she can't even say, look, it's awful. I get it. But I'm not running for attorney general. I'm running for governor. And I'll let voters decide or whatever. She shouldn't say anything. And you would think as a mother herself, deep inside somewhere, would be just a basic human revulsion to the idea. So either that doesn't exist, or much more likely, giving her the benefit of the doubt, she understands that the Democratic Party is only about power. And in order to achieve power, you need numbers. You need the most offices you can get. And then you can wield power, not for any specific end, but for its own sake. And they have that goal ever present in mind. Safety in numbers, stick together, and we win. And when we win, we can do whatever we want. Not make the country better, but we can do what we want. Our tribe will be in charge. That's the imperative. And they are focused on that relentlessly at every single level. I can promise you, if the Young Democrats organization had a group chat leaked, which of course wouldn't happen because no young Democrat would send his own group chat to Politico to screw his friends, like that just wouldn't happen because there's loyalty among thieves. But if that did happen, there's no doubt that the Young Democrats of America Association would just ignore it. They would do what Abigail Spanberger did, which she was willing to do. And the amazing thing is that woman who couldn't answer the most reasonable, simple question, are you for murdering kids, is likely to be elected the next governor of Virginia. So without getting too hysterical or fear-mongery or making the bogus claim that every Democrat wants to kill every Republican, that's not true. But there is unmistakably a hunger for violence among some Democratic leaders. There's no question. Well, now it's been revealed. And so the Charlie Kirk murder and the shooting of Steve Scalise, the attempted murder of Lee Zeldin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These were not anomalies. These were not randoms. They may have been lone gunmen with no accomplices or social media history. We may hear that again soon. But they're in no sense disconnected from the larger movement, which is totally committed to total control. And anyone who stands in the way of that and their children is a valid target. So keep that in mind. Most coffee companies sell weakness, watered-down drinks from faceless corporations that don't care about you or your family. Black Rifle, which, not to brag, is in this cup right here, is very different. It's roasted and brewed in this country without apology by patriotic men and women. The coffee is built by people who love the U.S. and know what it means to fight for it. We know them. We know the guys who run it. We've known them for a long time, and we know this is true. They're special forces veterans, ranchers, just decent people. They're the best of us, and the coffee is strong. The energy drinks, ooh, even stronger. It's not sugar water, not empty marketing. Fuel for people who get up early, work late, keep this nation running. Every purchase helps support veterans, first responders, law enforcement. From bold roast to ready-to-drink cans, mugs, T-shirts, gear, Black Rifle makes products with pride. Can a lot of companies say that? No, they can't. Visit blackrifle.com. Use code Tucker for 30% off your first order. That's blackriflecoffee.com. Code Tucker, or pick it up at your local convenience or grocery store. You will love it. And now to the specifics of the Virginia case. Terry Kilgore is the, I think, longest serving, certainly the top Republican in the Virginia House of Delegates. knows everybody involved in this. Terry, thanks so much for joining us. Jay Jones, who is this guy? And were you aware that he was fantasizing about genocide when you worked with him?
No, I served in the General Assembly with him, Tucker, and served with him for a few years. Served with his dad for probably 10 years. His dad was a great individual. We served on courts of justice together and commerce and labor together. So, no, I had no idea that anyone would be fantasizing about killing a Speaker of the House or his two kids who are 2 and 5 years old. It was just when I first heard this was crazy. I just thought, no, this couldn't be true, but it is true.
You did see Jay Jones, though, when the blackface scandal happened several years ago, jump up and down about how he'd been the victim of racism. You're from Southwest Virginia, which is overwhelmingly white and poor. This is a black guy, or part black guy, or whatever. He says he's a black guy from Norfolk, whose dad went to boarding school in Princeton. Both parents are judges. He goes to private school and then UVA law school. He is a child of privilege, if there ever was one. Did anyone, when he was going on about how he was the victim of racism, ever say, "Hey, son, you're a rich kid, shut up"?
Well, I mean, no, that I don't think they did. But every Democrat at that time, every Democrat called for Ralph Northam to resign. It was Abigail Spanberger called on Ralph Northam to resign. But switch to today, no Democrat, not one, not a single Democrat has called on Jay Jones to resign. And you know why? Because they lose Attorney General if they call on Jay Jones to resign. There's no decency there.
Why are they so focused on Attorney General?
But well, it's the chief law enforcement officer of the Commonwealth. The Attorney General has the right to sue or to join suits, to join these nationwide suits against the Trump administration that everybody's wanting to go against. That's one of their keys, because that's what Jay Jones has said. I'm going to be suing Donald Trump. And that's what they want. And that's why it's so important for them to have the Attorney General's office. But if you look at J.C. Ramirez, his mother escaped communist Cuba. He worked his way through college and law school. Great guy, J.C. Ramirez. Served with him in the House. He was in the House, and he's just a great individual.
He's the Republican incumbent.
He's the
Attorney
Republican.
General. Exactly. So this conversation, this text exchange happened several years ago. And when it happened, the Republican to whom he was texting, I don't have any idea what that was about, but it happened, sent this exchange to the Speaker, who was being threatened by Jay Jones, whose children were being threatened by Jay Jones. Did he tell anybody about it? Did you hear about it then?
No, I didn't hear about it at that time. I was majority leader at the time. I didn't hear about it, to be perfectly honest. I didn't know anything about it until the Friday that all this was released. And no, I think Todd was just handling it, in a way Todd normally handled things. Todd's a great guy, good friend. His 2 little kids are just precious little kids, 2 little boys. In school now, but at that time they were around the General Assembly all the time. Everybody knew the Gilbert kids, and Jay Jones would have known the Gilbert kids. That's what's terrible about this whole situation. It wasn't like, hey, I want to kill a kid who's from another country. You would know these kids, because you're around the General Assembly.
That's horrifying. So
Yes.
Todd got out. He's no longer serving. Is that correct?
No, he's no longer serving. He is now a Commonwealth attorney, assistant Commonwealth attorney in Page County. Talked to him this past week just to check on him. And the bad thing about it is now there has to be police presence where his kids are, and that's what's because they still receive threats, and that's what's bad about this whole ordeal.
So how is Jay Jones being treated? I know no one's called for him to get out of the race, but this is, and again, I said at the outset, there are lots of leaked text is an invasion of privacy. So I'm generally against leaking text. I've been the victim of it. I'm kind of sympathetic to people whose texts are leaked, but this is so unequivocal. The guy, she says, "Are you sure you want to kill the kids?" "Yes, I am." This is so over the top. How can this guy even have a job in Virginia of any kind?
Well, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, this was terrible. By him doubling down, as you said earlier, that just made it even worse. He didn't say, "Oh, no, I was just kidding."
Yeah, of course.
But no, he doubled down. She gave him an opportunity. Carrie gave him an opportunity, And he doubled down on that after she gave him the opportunity. So he said what he said. He meant what he said. And I would just like for one Democrat to come out and say, hey, he should resign. He does not need to be the chief law enforcement officer of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
How long have you been in an elected office?
I've been in the House of Delegates 32 years, and before that, I was the Commonwealth Attorney in Scott County for 6 years. So I've been 38 years of my life. I've been in the public, and as you said, growing up in rural Southwest Virginia, first my brother and I first of our family to graduate from college, and grew up in a blue collar family. We didn't have all these privileges that a lot of folks had. So. It's Southwest Virginia, and growing up from down there, you have certain values. As you're on the tail end of the Appalachian Mountains up there, so you know how the values are in rural America. They're different.
Yeah, well, when your dad goes to Princeton and is a judge, and you're claiming to be the victim of racism when you went to the most expensive school, it does suggest a certain kind of entitlement. Does this give you the creeps a little bit that people you served with are dreaming about killing kids?
I mean, it does. It makes you think. I've never had those dreams. I've never had those thoughts. I mean, why would you ever have thoughts like that unless you really, truly just hated someone? You really, truly hated someone. And this was all about gun control. This was an argument we were having about gun control in the General Assembly. And that's what some of these texts were related to. So, I'm not going to get mad over anything like that. I don't care what the issue is. I mean, would I be disappointed in certain votes? Yes. But would I get that far along where I'm threatening someone or their kids? Absolutely not. Common decency, Christian values are not going to let you go. That shouldn't let you go that far.
What's the problem with Spanberger? Why wouldn't she? I mean, she stared ahead like a robot, like some kind of creepy bot. Like what was that?
I mean, she looked like a deer, and I like deer. Come on, I like deer. She looked like a deer in the headlights. I was just sitting there like, who in the world told her just to stare? I mean, if she won't answer for her kids, that she wouldn't want her kids to be in this situation, is she going to protect your kids? That's what I would be asking if I was doing some serious. I say, if she won't protect her kids, is she really going to protect your kids? And that's a no.
And what's going on with her soul? I mean, I know she was a CIA officer, so that's already a fair question. But I mean, how could someone like that be governor?
I mean, the polls are tightening. We're seeing a big shift in Virginia. We're watching the polls move our way, and we just hope it's quick enough. Of course, we got this early voting, 45 days out, which was I didn't vote for, which is crazy. Yeah, it's too long because things do change. As we were talking about here today. So we hope that we can catch up. We hope that I think Miyares has caught up and is ahead. So that's some good news. But we just need to keep pushing.
That's unbelievable. Terry Kilgore, head Republican in the Virginia House. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you.
We're sorry to say it, but this is not a very safe country. Walk through Oakland or Philadelphia. Yeah, good luck. So most people, when they think about this, want to carry a firearm, and a lot of us do. The problem is there can be massive consequences for that. Ask Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse got off in the end, but he was innocent from the first moment. It was obvious on video, and he was facing life in prison anyway. That's what the anti-gun movement will do. They'll throw you in prison for defending yourself with a firearm. And that's why a lot of Americans are turning to Byrna. It's a proudly American company. Byrna makes self-defense launchers that hundreds of law enforcement departments trust. They've sold over 600,000 pistols, mostly to private citizens who refuse to be empty-handed. These pistols, and I have one, fire rock-hard kinetic rounds or tear gas rounds and pepper projectiles, and they stop a threat from up to 60 feet away. There are no background checks. There are no waiting periods. Byrna can ship it directly to your door. You can't be arrested for defending yourself with a Byrna pistol. Visit Byrna, BYRNA.com, or your local Sportsman's Warehouse to get yours today. Byrna.com. So the question is this a national trend? You don't want to be paranoid. You don't want to take, one act of violence and extrapolate out and start slandering half the country's population. But there is a theme here. It's unmistakable. Steve Bannon is one of the deepest thinkers on the right, has noticed this, thought about it, and joins us now. Steve, thanks so much for doing this. The Jay Jones thing seems, I'm hard to shock, but it does seem like kind of a next level escalation.
It's definitely up the escalatory ladder, Tucker, and as a native Virginian, it's pretty shocking that what's shocking is not so much that he thought these horrible thoughts, which is bad enough, but that no one's come out and condemned him. It's been absolute silence. And of course, the Democrat nominee, it's just a word salad. She can't even explain it. So it shows you how radicalized the Democratic Party's become. But I think people better get ready. It's going to get a lot worse. And I think that's because you saw the Supreme Court today, the argument about DEI districts. You've seen this controversy over the mid-decade census. You've seen the redistricting fight. We could pick up 21. If you add all that together, I think the Times is saying on the DEI alone, the racial imbalance, I think the Times has us picking up 12 seats, Politico 19 seats. That does not include all the redistricting fights, which is another 21 gross seats there. And you add in really doing a real census where illegal aliens are not counted. They're never going to take back the House and the Senate. And so you're only going to, what gets me is we're on an arc that they're only progressively going to get more violent. And you can see this in their worship of Mangini, the worship of this, the alleged assassin of Charlie Kirk. So I think it's going to get a lot worse.
Given that, and I hope you're wrong, but I sense you're not, what do you make of Congressman Mike Lawler's response and the governing board of the National Young Republicans organization to these text messages, which I'm not endorsing, by the way, but calling someone a retard or these kids should be destroyed? Like it's an interesting contrast. The Republicans kind of are very quick to shame their own.
They'll always fold. Establishment Republicans will always fold on, as you know this, better than anybody. In any fight, they're going to fold, and they're going to try to be supplicants to the media. They're going to try to be supplicants to the media, a kind of Chamber of Commerce, big donor attitude, that we want to be invited to the parties, we want to be in the club, we want to have the New York Times write nice things about us. We're heading towards a civil war. I don't think there's any doubt. We looked at the indices out there, and these are unbridgeable divides right now and getting deeper. And the Democratic Party is getting more and more radical. Look, everything we're dealing with right now is about illegal aliens, whether it's they want to spend $1 trillion on their health care, whether they're demanding a census that counts them for congressional races and for electoral college, whether it's the mass deportations that we're trying to get done in Portland, Chicago, Los Angeles. Everything's around. If they don't have illegal aliens, if they don't have a foreign entity in here and folks in here, there's no way for them to put together the votes. They love democracy, but it's just the math doesn't work. You saw the Supreme Court today. You see these redistricting fights, and the redistricting fights are kind of like the kids in this chat room. If we had enough stones and urgency and maximalization strategy, the 21 would already be up on the table, right? We'd be now executing how you do it. We have to do a whole fight about that. So the establishment, because they come up in this paradigm where the established order controls everything, and they want to be part of the established order. And we see that we got here, we've gotten here over 40 or 50 years, and we've won enough times as Republicans, the House, the Senate, the presidency. The country's basically on a cliff of an abyss, and if it hadn't been for Trump, with all his imperfections, the country would be over. So it's just going to get worse. We're going to always have, like this thing in Kansas, where they're going to throw, people under the bus immediately and cower and be supplicants and ask for forgiveness for people who are not worthy of us asking for forgiveness. And the fight is going to get more intense. The left is going to get more radical. They're going to go up more the escalatory ladder. Look, Mangini's a hero to them. You got to face and Mondami. He's a Marxist jihadist that's going to win, I don't know, by 15 points or so in New York City. Sadiq Khan. Everything they have is even more radical than you can anticipate. It's getting worse every day. They're not being resolved. There's nothing, and it's really nothing to debate. We have this chasm. And to me, it's the issue I have is that the Trump administration and Pam Bondi and the crew are not moving quickly enough. They had a thing today in the Oval, which was great, about stopping, violence in the streets. That's great, and I appreciate that. But we have to focus on the deep state. We have to focus on taking this apparatus. We only have a short window of time, I think, to be able to do this, and we're not prioritizing it, and we're not hiring enough U.S. attorneys to focus on it, and we're not getting that. If we don't get that done, these statistics we're putting out and the great job at Cash and people and Dan Bond Jr. are doing about arresting bad guys is not going to matter, because you're going to have more bad guys later invited back in by these people. So now it's time to, I think, maximize our own strategy, seize the institutions, and move with a sense of urgency.
Can you give a couple examples of what you think DOJ should be doing right now?
Well, first off, I think DOJ, we got attorneys. I think we got to go back to the beginning. You have to go back to the election. You have to go back to January 6th. Look at Nancy Pelosi. There's a young reporter, Allison Steinberg, over at Lindell TV. She asked Nancy Pelosi a question today about January 6th and about the National Guard, and Nancy Pelosi turned around, screamed at her from a few feet away, "Shut up. How can you ask that?" They're so sensitive about January 6th, so you got to go back to the stolen election of 2020. You've got to go back to January 6th. You have to take the whole continuum. You have to go back to the whole thing on Crossfire Hurricane. You have to adjudicate everything they did, and we have to do it in public. Even throwing the pandemic in there and the response, the summer of love, all of it. If to keep this republic and keep it as a constitutional republic, we have to be fair about this. We have to be transparent about it. We have to adjudicate it by the rule of law, but it has to be done. And you see, we're making some progress. You got Comey with a couple of charges on appetizer, John Bolton, maybe with a couple, Letitia James, but it's not good enough and it's not fast enough. And the only way we're going to solve this is U.S. attorneys. I think we're 25 or 30 short is what I'm hearing. There's just some sort of backlog, and you can't depend on a Halligan coming out of nowhere and being able to drop a couple right away. We have to take apart the deep state, and we have to do it now in every aspect that's happened over the last couple of years. At Charlie's, I know you were at the Student Action Summit down at Tampa, and normally, you know me, I'm running out there, we're at war, and I'm dropping the mic and running around like a madman. I told Charlie before, and I said, this is going to be very different. I said, I'm going to go out with what I call the Tampa Resolves, and it is, we have to prioritize everything else we're working on. It has to be to go after the deep state. That combination of national security, intelligence, law enforcement, the Pentagon, its interconnections with Wall Street and big tech, that we have to do that. If we don't go after that and do it now with a sense of urgency, we're never going to have another shot. This is the time we have to do it. We have to make it a priority. And I said, you're going to find out something. That's the third resolve I said was, no, do it now, do it with urgency. And the third was, who's ever not with us is against us. This is the best way we can unmask everybody, because this is not going to be pleasant. It's not going to be easy. You and I are called, you're called more names than I am, but we were both, by the Tel Aviv Levin crowd, we're called everything, right? They're going to do more of that because the deep state is also connected with certain of our allies. You have to go do this, and you have to do it. It's not going to be pleasant. You're going to get thrown out of your country club maybe, but if you're going to save the republic, we have to do this now. And a part of that, you're going to see if you do that, the escalating political violence of the more and more radical left, and quite frankly, more and more of the central apparatus of the Democratic Party is going to be gutted. And that's why I think, President Trump, I know, wants to focus. Todd Blanche talked about it today in the Oval Office. It has to happen. And it's only going to happen, I think, if people like you and myself and some others keep saying, hey, guys, I understand you got 1,000 things you're working on, but we have to start to rank order priorities. And this has to be the priority right now for President Trump.
I mean, there are so many places you could start, but it seems obvious that you would start with the FBI. And we now know it's confirmed that there were hundreds of plainclothes FBI agents in the crowd on January 6th. So that changes. That's not crowd control. That's political subversion. And it kind of confirms what a lot of people have been saying for a number of years now, that there was a fake element to that. There were a lot of sincere people protesting what they thought was the theft of the election, but there were also clearly agitators in the crowd. It was a setup to some extent. Obviously, hundreds of plainclothes
Yes.
FBI agents. And, I almost got fired for saying that a couple of years ago. It was obvious to me, but now we know it's true. In fact, it's worse than we thought it was. How many FBI officials have been fired for that?
No, I mean, you continue to ask how many have been let go. I think a handful. I don't know. It hasn't been enough to register with any type of head count that OMB is doing or
Right.
budget. The budget increase. Look, I love Cash and I love Dan Bongino.
Yeah,
Cash
me
is like
too.
a brother to me. But they're two guys hanging on by their fingernails. The same with Pam and Todd. This is why I say the official inside the U.S. Attorney, main justice, you need about another 25 or 30 of these prosecutors. You got to get on with it. The FBI, look, I for a long time have said, I think we got to bifurcate. It's too big, too complicated, covers too much stuff. Like the counterterrorism, you got to bifurcate it. I think you put the counterterrorism, first off, you downsize it and you put it in the intelligence part over DHS and you have a reorganization of that. This is law enforcement. I'll be tied to U.S. attorneys. We ought to have a much
Exactly.
smaller federal police force, which this is. It ought to have a much tighter mandate. We have to have much more control because, look, the scandal of the FBI is twofold. Number one is what they did and the mentality and the organizing principles inside the FBI that made it that you would do it. And it was career enhancing to do it. In fact, you would not think of not doing it. The whistleblowers were a handful. I mean, I'd sit on the war room every day and say, hey, look, you're not going to be able to use the SS excuse that, hey, I was just following orders. We've only had a handful of whistleblowers. And we know from the other day of even getting this information you're talking about and others talking about came from, it's not that Dan and Cash admit, we don't control it. We didn't get the information. This came through a whistleblower. This came through some person that was afraid of getting wrapped up in this. But the FBI to me should be downsized by 2/3. First off, by splitting it up and then going through, because remember the second part of the scandal, and maybe the more important, is that Ray bald-faced lied to people for years and years and years. And the oversight, it just kind of went over the oversight. If we hadn't won and come back from nowhere, because they never thought we were coming back, right? That's one of the reasons they were so blatant. We wouldn't know any of this today because Congress didn't perform its functions. And I might add that this was a Republican administration. It was President Trump's administration. And we can kind of control for a moment the apparatus of which they lied to us. And there was no follow-up on the oversight. It's just, okay, so Ray was able to kind of worm out of it. It's so deep. It requires to me you have to go in with a trenching tool and dig them out. And we got to have Cash and Dan's back to do that. We're not doing it right now. And you can't depend upon just a random whistleblower to have a act of conscience, right? You can't depend upon the kindness of others. We have to do this, and it's going to be unpleasant. And the New York Times is going to say you're a bunch of fascists, and the New Yorker is going to say terrible things about you. But hey, who cares? We're trying to save our country right now. And now we've won everything. If we don't take advantage of every frickin' moment because we're burning daylight, this is going to pass. There's going to be all kind of other issues come up, and we're just going to, okay, let's go have another election. It's not enough.
We've already wasted months and months and months on this Iran, Qatar insanity, totally unrelated to the insanity. But also you sort of wonder, like, what's the cost? Not just the financial cost, but the cost in attention and priority.
The opportunity cost.
But
huge.
What is this impulse? You've been in Republican politics really at the center of it for so long, where Republicans seem to spend most of their time policing, the leaders policing their members and their voters. Like, what is that?
It's the abused spouse syndrome or whatever. By the way, the policing is immediate and constant, right? And almost like Cromwell. I mean, the policing is immediate, and there's no discussion about how this happened or whatever. But for the left, you let them get away with the most egregious crime, and they know that. They know that institutionally the party is weak. Because the party's not a party of government, obviously, of individuals, but it's attracted, and you know this better than anybody, just people who kind of want to get along, who want to have people not say bad things about them, and the way to do that is just to go along. And if we can make some changes on the margin, it would work. If that strategy worked, the country wouldn't be on the edge of the abyss. Even with Trump, we are on the edge of the abyss. And people, and many people waking up, the MAGA base knows it. They got the pitchforks. They're ready to roll. In fact, every day when I do the show, they're blowing me up of, hey, why are we not doing more about the deep state? Why are we not naming names? Why are people out there? Which is great. So we have a voting base of blue collar and middle class people who are saying, we've had a belly full of this and we want action, right? And you have still a political apparatus that continues to say, because even Dan Bongino, those guys are police. Look when our people go up to Capitol Hill. They get as tough a grilling by the Republicans oftentimes as they do the Democrats. The Democrats are so over the top; it's insane. But there's still the correction police, the be politically correct is still there, and still the mentality of it. The only way we're going to do that is to just take action and get some scalps. And that's why I think you're starting to see through some of these indictments, maybe Bolton, but it's not enough, and you're not getting to the central apparatus part, which we have to get to.
I mean, a lot of the political consultants at highest level Republican political consultants seem very consumed with knocking off Marjorie Taylor Greene or Thomas Massey. You don't have to agree with everything those people are calling for, but you can't say they're liberal. They're not liberal. I mean, Massey's kind of a libertarian, but he's a lot more conservative than, I don't know, Lindsey Graham or Mike Lawler by any measure. And yet they seem like they're spending 80% of their day trying to find a primary challenger for Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, what is that? It almost seems like subversion to me.
They're so tied to the Israel First money. This is they're trying to crush Massey out in, and Massey's not perfect. Right, MTG. I'm very close to MTG. She's not perfect. She flipped and went with McCarthy, but she's a firebrand and she's a fighter. And when a fight counts, she's going to be there with you.
Well, and they're both sincere. That's the thing.
Yes.
Look, I don't agree with everything. I do agree with everything Marjorie says, but I don't agree with everything Massey says. But he's totally sincere. He's not getting paid to say these things. He means it. And isn't that who you want on your side?
They don't. Look, Luntz and these guys, remember, if you look back up at Capitol Hill, and I know you know the math here, we only have a handful of MAGA people, right? Yeah. If you look in the Senate, we got maybe Eric Schmidt, maybe Josh Hawley, both from Missouri. In the House, we got a handful. And because they look at Trump as a passing summer storm. It could be bad, but it's going to pass. And this is why I'm saying we have to have a sense of urgency. We're burning daylight. They just hope to tap President Trump along, and they'll get to midterms, and then 2028, and they'll just Ted Cruz already had a big article in the Daily Telegraph. He's already putting his team together. I know it's totally random. It's totally random from your interview, and that Israel First has to have a candidate since they just got crushed here in the last couple of days. But it is because certain vested interests want people to kind of kowtow to a line, right? And if you fall outside that, they're going to come after you. And I think that's why it behooves us. Look, Fox just had the first interview, I think with Mamdani, right? He gets on there, 6 minutes. They got a big debate tomorrow night. The only question was about Gaza and Israel. They're asking this guy, with everything else going on, and quite frankly, how he's a Marxist jihadist, but he has kind of taken populism and talked about affordability. You think you might want to get in back of the Working Families Party and DSA and how they replicate the Trump, turning point, war room, precinct strategy for ground game for low information, low propensity voters. And this is why they're blowing guys out, because they had no money at first against Cuomo. Now, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about arresting Bibi Netanyahu. You haven't given Trump credit. And what do you think about the Gaza piece? Literally 5 minutes, the first interview, 5 minutes, all about Israel. This is just this obsession with it. And when I gave that keynote speech to kind of wrap up the National Conservatism Conference, which is kind of got a strong neocon take on it, I said, to quote T.E. Lawrence from the 7 Pillars of Wisdom, what they told him at the time when he showed up at Cairo's military headquarters, they said, look, the Middle East is a sideshow to the main event, the Western Front. And
that's right.
The Arab Revolt is a sideshow to a sideshow. And I said, the Middle East right now for us, with everything geopolitically going on, and the economic war with China, and our nation sliding toward a civil war around insurrection with a party like the Democrats have an escalatory ladder of violence. The Middle East is a sideshow, and the Israel issue is a sideshow to a sideshow. That's full stop. and you can't let it be the central thing that you revolve around. And I'm a supporter of Israel, and I'm a supporter of the Jewish people, but the Israel first aspect of this has taken our eyes so far off the ball because they kept saying it's going to tear MAGA apart. It's not going to tear MAGA apart because it's not a big enough fundamental issue to tear us apart. And that's why we have to focus on the time that we have to really take down the central thing that President Trump will be known for. One will be some of this peace on the Eurasian landmass, et cetera. But the central thing, if he can accomplish it, and we must accomplish it on his tour of duty, is the deconstruction of the administrative state and the destruction of the deep state.
So the First Amendment is the one truly distinctive thing that makes America America. It makes this country great. You are a citizen. That means you can speak openly and honestly without fear about what you actually believe. The government doesn't own you, you own the government. That's the premise, and for 250 years we've lived it. We hope to keep living it. Our sponsor, Pure Talk, understands how important this is, how central it is. So if you want to support brands that defend freedom and American values, we recommend switching your wireless service to Pure Talk, which is way cheaper and uses the same towers the other guys use. It's the best. We know what you're thinking. Of course, giving business to companies that share your values sounds nice, but at the end of the day, you don't want to spend more for the privilege of buying products from a company that loves America. Well, you don't have to. Pure Talk's plans start at just $25 a month, $25 for the same 5G coverage the other companies provide, literally the same cell towers. And you support a business that believes in this country and creates jobs here in this country. If you're interested, visit puretalk.com/Tucker to switch to our wireless company, the one we use, Pure Talk. Right now, you save an additional 50% off your first month. Again, puretalk.com/Tucker. What are the midterms going to look like, do you think?
Well, hey, if we get the redistricting things, and I think Mike Davis was on the show earlier, and of course the left is melting down this afternoon after the Supreme Court, debates, or the Supreme Court, today on the DEI congressional gerrymandering districts. If we get a win there, and we do the redistricting that is only fair to the American people, if we get those, you could add another, 10 or 15, maybe 20 net seats. It'll be quite hard to overcome. We can't, if we allow Hakeem Jeffries, the guys, either steal seats or win seats, and they take over the House, people have to understand the whole Trump revolution comes to a full stop. There will be subpoenas flying the first day. Trump will be impeached in the first 3 weeks. Not that he'll be removed from office, but they'll go through the whole rigmarole. You're going to have subpoenas flying everywhere. The whole fight every day will be trench warfare against Hakeem Jeffries and these guys to keep our revolutionary movement going, to basically return ourselves to a constitutional republic. That's the stakes of these midterms. And that's why I say every person, every governor, and a lot of these governors are not working with us because guess what? They don't. It's like Cox in Utah, was it Pilsen in Nebraska? They don't want to upset the apple cart. They don't have people say bad things about them. And so if we get the redistricting done that are out there to do, and you have a ruling from the Supreme Court that talks about, these are net, I think times I said 12 and Politico 19. It's a steep hill for Jeffries to overcome. And I think this is a danger also for the country. I think as they see that the democratic process is not going to work for them, that basically the dynamics and demographics of the country, also a revival of, I think, religious, because I think this young generation, 18 to 30s, particularly the men, are the most based generation we've ever had.
For sure.
That if this keeps coming, they're not going to be able to win at the ballot box. And so they will go to, in a twist on Clausewitz, they will go to violence of other means politically when the political process and the democracy doesn't work. Because remember, the people that beat the drum of democracy were the Bolsheviks back in 17. The left uses the same type of language. And people should understand, when they understand that the Electoral College has moved away from them, that the House has moved away from them for the legitimate and fair demographics and shifts in the nation, they're going to get more violent, they're going to get more angry, and they're going to get more dangerous.
So we have institutions to deal with civil unrest, of course, and one of them is the FBI. And so it seems like it would be a matter of self-preservation. If you're on the side of the Constitution and Heritage America and just like normal people, you would want an institution, a law enforcement agency that could keep riots from metastasizing into civil war. So you'd want to make sure the FBI was on the side of the Constitution, no? Like immediately.
You would, but I think they're trying. This is what I'm saying. You have an institutional problem there, just not a personnel problem. It's just not a Comey or a Wray.
Right.
There's a deep rot, and why? Because remember the traditional Catholics they went after. That's my parish, and my parents, who are blue collar people, started a little traditional Latin Mass parish as a spinoff from the Benedictine Abbey back in the late 70s. And these are the people that have 8 and 9 kids. A couple of people of the kids go in the Marines or the Navy. It's just the salt of the earth. They have no money. It's blue collar. That's the parish they focused on to make this thing over the entire country, that this is where extremism is. And you can't have a more Americana place than this. It's the institution that's rotted. When I was in Danbury Prison, some of the most remarkable men I've ever met are these men that are in prison for 5, 6, 7, 8 years for praying the rosary outside of an abortion clinic. That's all they did. They go to prison. And of course, they have women that are grandmothers in the other prisons. If you look across the board, the FBI, if we think it lost its way under Hoover, and we think institutionally it drifted, and even in 9/11, it's just had a terrible track record. There's a deep rot in there that's quite frankly anti-American. So now when really America, you're right, would need it as an institution most, you actually have to go in and institutionally take this thing apart. I think bifurcate it, get the two, law enforcement and counterintelligence and intel, out of there, and then deal with the law enforcement. But still, layer by layer, you have to take it apart. You have to bring in a new generation of FBI agents, train them up, almost start like Hoover, start it over again, think it through, and then go. Otherwise, you're just putting a Band-Aid on a shotgun wound, and it's not going to work. And I think that's the mentality on Capitol Hill. You can see this. There's no urgent. There's no budget cuts coming from this. There's no getting the director up there and raking him over the coals about how many personnel have you let go. Let me see the internal reports. We're finding these things out every couple of days from whistleblowers who are getting nervous they may get wrapped up in an investigation. But that's not good enough. That's not systemically going through this.
Whose fault is that?
I think it's
like, where's Mike Johnson? Where's the Speaker of the House in this?
He's the epitome of what you talk about law. He's the personification of, we wouldn't have been in this shape with all the elections we won, right? Both at the presidential level, House, Senate. We wouldn't have been in this shape if you had men and women of courage and basically saying, I don't care what they say about me. I don't care if I'm here for 2 terms or 20 terms. I'm going to get to the heart of this. He's a go along to get along guy, obviously. And that's the institutional mindset over there. It's a kind of a faceless crowd. That's why the Marjorie Taylor Greens stick out, right? This is why certain people kind of stick out, because they are fire breathers, the Matt Gaetzes of the world. If you're a fire breather, you stick out and they want to hammer you down, right? They want to throw you under the bus. So I think that institution has to be changed. But I think we got to go after the executive branch institution, so we're not going to have a lot of time, and we're going to meet tremendous resistance on this. The deeper one, the FBI, as bad as the FBI is, which is terrible. When you look at the intelligence apparatus and the national security part with the Pentagon, because remember, why did we just have a huge win in basically breaking the back of the Israel First people? Because about the Iran to Persian situation. Right. And we now know from the Times of Israel, right, not from the Tucker Carlson show and not from War Room and not from Breitbart, you now know that the War Cabinet's minutes and debate was about a 2-year stretch for this nuclear program to really be of danger or kick in. 2 years, of which we said all the time, not 2 days, not 2 weeks. Yet the CIA, and I say Ratcliffe's a guy we ought to bring up and have him testify in front of Congress and grill him. How did he give the president totally different information than Tulsi Gabbard and her team, who turned out to be right? And remember, we went for 2 months, and Tulsi Gabbard that was thrown under the bus every day. There was a horrible article about her. She's not a team player. She's incompetent. She's over her head. And she got a little bit ostracized there for a minute until people realized, hello, she actually did an aggregate of all the different 17 branches, and she was right. There was no change from her original testimony. It was about two years away or thereabouts, according to the War Cabinet of the Israeli government, the Netanyahu government. And it kind of comports to when Brett Baer pressed him up that Sunday night, was saying, hey, why was this so urgent the other day? And, go, oh, how about, and then he said, well, we're 6 months to a year away. That's another bald-faced lie. It's 2 years, and he just debated this the other night. That effort shows us that we have a massive problem in the intelligence apparatus. And that, to me, should be as high a priority as the FBI. You have to do them both. You have to do them now. You have to put a team together to go do it. And the people you put together have to be incredibly tough and incredibly focused. But that's why I think I've been arguing for a special prosecutor for this entire kind of deep state, or at least the conspiracy against Trump in the first term and rolling over to the second term of Clapper and Brennan and all these guys. So I think you either do it that way, or internally, if you can do it, but hire more U.S. attorneys, cut the FBI down by at least a third immediately, even if you have to give up some things you're working on. Because I think right now the people are saying, hey, look, it's great with the crime thing you did today, Cash, I feel better. But you know what? President Trump's committed to put troops into the cities, and he should if we have to shut this crime down. So let's just start taking the FBI apart. I don't think any one person's to blame. I think it is that there's so much going on. They're so overwhelmed on other topics. We just need to kind of triage this and say, okay, guys, let's think about the end game here. Like, let's go 3 years down range. Where do we want to be on these institutions, and kind of work back to that, to the day. I think you can get great people in there to do it.
So you said you think that violence could be coming, or is coming, moving towards some kind of national split. There's always a flashpoint that kicks off. Usually it's manufactured. The death of George Floyd, for example. But when that happens, it comes out of nowhere. No one's prepared for it. And Republicans in general, Republican leaders, miss what it is. Nikki Haley on the first day of the George Floyd riots cheered on the riots. Many Republicans in Washington reacted to January 6th like it was an actual insurrection. Like they go along with the lie, and that has huge downstream effects. Will that happen again whenever that flashpoint comes?
Certainly, no doubt, because these are not courageous people. They would rather be supplicants and have approval in the architecture of approval. They would rather go to the side that's going to pat ahead. Here's what I tell people. I gave this talk at Semaphor's, their little Davos they do in the spring, when Ben Smith invited me to talk at kind of one of the guys that wrapped it up. And I said, look, you may not like the populist policies I put forward, economics. You may not like the fact that I push to have a tax increase for the wealthy, right? Because you do the math, and something's going to have to give here. We're just not going to grow our way out of it. But I said, you're going to have a choice. Your choice is Mangini, right? Or really populist nationalism. Because this is before Mondami, so now they got to count two. But the hero worship of that guy, the hero worship of the alleged assassin, and I'm not even sure, I haven't seen enough to believe he's the assassin. I think it's a much deeper conspiracy. But the hero worship by the radicals on the left, particularly the most radical, which may be these trannies, right? They're now basically very disturbed men and very manipulative men. That's who most of them are, right? Who are now down on this and want it to be a gunfight. I said, you should watch online, and you should watch how they're kind of turned into heroes if you want to see where this thing's going to go. Because it's not going to, with Reddit and these other chat rooms, it's only getting darker. And the more they lose, and particularly the more that they see that structurally the country's changed, and finally with Trump and others, you've had people that will call that out. The Supreme Court will move on it. People will do these redistrictings. That institutionally we will start to at least make some movement there. When they see that it's impossible to take back the House or to take back the Senate, so in the Electoral College, I think it's going to be very, very difficult. But even if they take that, we would structurally have the House and Senate as a check and start to do the deconstruction of the Administrative State with Russ Vought and the team. They're going to get more violent. They're not going to get more. They're not going to embrace some sort of Martin Luther King or Gandhi. The underlying philosophy and ethics of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. They're not going to go. It's not going to be the Beatitudes. They're going to get more dangerous, and you can see this how they're getting egged on by MSNBC, how they're getting egged on by the corporate media on the left. And so that's where I think we're going to a very dark place. But when you go through hell, let's go through as quickly as possible. And I think we have to stand and face it today so our kids and grandkids don't have to do it.
So how should people prepare for that personally? People who have no control over Supreme Court decisions or electoral maps, like a family, how do you prepare for what you think is imminent?
Well, I think first a family ought to be in your daily life. Like one of our sponsors is My Patriot Supply. 10 years ago, that was looked like as wing nuts, right? Yeah, it's a tinfoil hat. It's not a tinfoil hat. You look what's happening to the grid. You look what's going to happen to these data centers, even the water use of the data centers. Number one, as a family unit, I think you ought to get to know each other very well and spend time in each other's life. You ought to have set readings and try to do the underpinnings of our culture more and more and more to really nurture the unit of the family. But number two, I think you've got to get ready. You have to think through, not to be paranoid, but to say, look, in modernity, there's going to be a lot of risk. How as we as a unit rationally mitigate that risk? How do we mitigate the risk to our family, to our food supply, to electricity, to our phones and communications? Let's just go through and maybe assign a great task for a 12-year-old. Hey, think this through for us. So assign all the risk out there for the family without being paranoid and go through a risk mitigation exercise. And to leave that thought is the reason I make everybody who comes to work for me watch 12 O'Clock High. It's a movie made in the 1940s. There's only 2 films shown at Harvard Business School. And they showed this film about organizational behavior and how you change an organization to make it excellent, right? And you just know that this family unit, we're gonna survive and we're gonna thrive. But we're going to do this right. And I think if you just start doing that every day and make it part, just doing reps like you do in football, make it part of the natural reflex of your family unit, and you take leadership in the family, no matter if you're the husband, the wife, the kids, you take leadership in that, we're going to be fine. I think, by the way, I feel actually very good. And one of the reasons I look at this younger generation, particularly men, don't want to downplay women, but the college-educated women are so far gone. Yeah. Right, by and large, the left. But if you look at this young generation of men, 18 to 30, they're the most based generation I think we've ever had. And they're coming either with fathers or uncles or older brothers that volunteered for these endless wars and really fought every bit as great as Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I, World II, as volunteers in a thankless effort that you might add was pointless too. And I think that the strength of that, coupled with this kind of base and the return to, I think you're seeing a return to not just Christian values and reading the Bible, but an interest in the underpinnings of philosophy and theology for the West. They want to know more about Western culture. They want to know why modernity has outlawed American, basically traditional culture. This is, I consider myself a populist nationalist traditionalist. I don't call myself a conservative, haven't for years, because I think the conservatives are they've just acted like pussies. They roll over all the time, and you can't do that. You have to be as hard or harder than the left. And I think, Tucker, I really feel good. I think we have very dark days ahead of us, both globally with the CCP and others to get sucked into these wars. I think we have very dark days in front of us as a country, but I can start to see the sunlit uplands way, 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 way off in the distance. And so I'm very enthusiastic of where we are. And I think my enthusiasm comes from this young generation who had everything against it. The propaganda in the schools, the destruction of their culture, the outing of them for everything if they didn't fall in line with the most radical things of sexuality or gender or climate change, all these things from the official source. They came through it. To come through that with a set and apparatus that is so radical, trying to either other you or destroy you every day, and they came through that, that shows you we have the basic foundation that we've had from the beginning of every patriot's grave down to the future, and that makes me feel we got this, but we got to get on with it.
In the distance, I can see the sunlit uplands. Boy, I'm putting that on my refrigerator. Steve Bannon, eloquent and wise. Thank you so much for doing this.
Tucker, always an honor and an honor to fight in the trenches with you. You have taken amazing abuse for helping lead this country Oh, it's incredible. I mean, it's what you and what I love about it, you're still the same Tucker Carlson. You're a hail fellow well met. You're a nice guy. You haven't become cynical. You haven't become nasty. And people don't, I think, realize all the pressure you're under. But you're one of the leaders in this country, and we're getting to a better place. We're getting towards that sunlit uplands because guys like you are at the lead, the tip of the spear in this fight.
Well, thanks. Well, my wife doesn't even know what happened, so it's in my house. It's not even real. So fun. Steve Bannon, great to see you, man. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you for watching. Here's to the sunlit uplands on the horizon. We've got a new website we hope you will visit. It's called newcommissionnow.com, and it refers to a new 9/11 commission. So we spent months putting together our 9/11 documentary series. And if there's one thing we learned, it's that, in fact, there was foreknowledge of the attacks. People knew.
The American public deserves to know.
We're shocked, actually, to learn that, to have that confirmed, but it's true. The evidence is overwhelming. The CIA, for example, knew the hijackers were here in the United States. They knew they were planning an act of terror.
In his passport is a visa to go to the United States of America.
A foreign national was caught celebrating as the World Trade Center fell and later said he was in New York, quote, to document the event. How did he know there would be an event to document in the first place? Because he had foreknowledge. And maybe most amazingly, somebody, an unknown investor, shorted American Airlines and United Airlines, the companies whose planes the attackers used on 9/11, as well as the banks that were inside the Twin Towers just before the attacks. They made money on the 9/11 attacks because they knew they were coming. Who did that?
You have to look at the evidence.
The U.S. government learned the name of that investor, but never released it. Maybe there's an innocent explanation for all this, but there isn't, actually. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether there is or not. The public deserves to know what the hell that was. How did people know ahead of time, and why was no one ever punished for it? 9/11 Commission, the original one, was a fraud. It was fake. Its conclusions were written before the investigation. That's true, and it's outrageous. This country needs a new 9/11 Commission, one that actually tells the truth, that tries to get to the bottom of the story. We can't just move on like nothing happened.
9/11 Commission is a cover.
Something did happen. We need to force a new investigation into 9/11 almost 25 years later. Sorry, justice demands it. And if you want that, go to newcommissionnow.com to add your name to our petition. We're not getting paid for this. We're doing this because we really mean it. newcommissionnow.com.